In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And we are back live and recording. Welcome to Doomed to Fail, the podcast that brings you two amazing stories twice a week, every week for the past 2.5 years, and we will continue on for a long time to go. I'm joined here by Taylor, and I'm Forrest. Hi, Taylor.
Wow, that really works.
Threw you for a loop, didn't I?
You really woke yourself up. Yeah, we'll keep doing this until the world ends, which could be tomorrow. I don't fucking know.
We don't know.
Why not keep doing it? Yeah, I saw an Instagram post where a guy was like, the day before the last day on Earth. And it was like someone just like going to work. He's like, what are you going to do? You never know what's going to happen.
Taylor, I have a lot of like fun commentary to tell you that I can't be recorded talking about, but I'll share with you later on.
Great.
But yeah, we are here and the world has continued. So we're going to go ahead and record. Taylor, did I leave anything off of my introduction that I should have said that now that, you know?
No, I think that was great. You did great.
All right.
Good job.
So we'll go ahead and dive in. I am going to be today's storyteller, and I know that's going to disappoint a lot of our listeners, but
No.
But I have a really fun one. So I kicked off March with Women's History Month, covering women who've done horrible things throughout history. I did Elizabeth Bathory, I did Irma Gressa, and then before Irma Gressa, I took a detour and forgot that I was doing this and did a story about Hachi, the beloved dog that was loyal to his master. But now I'm back on women. And I'm going to go across the pond from Europe into the United States. Taylor, I learned Louisiana has like a lot of crazy history. Like it is like this story, a lot of it intersects with like the history of like Louisiana, because I'm going to cover a woman in Louisiana named Delphine LaLaurie, which I know you've heard of, right? Okay. I was going to get to this at the very end, but I'll tell you now. Did you know that Nicolas Cage bought her house and then it went into foreclosure?
Yes.
Man, he made a lot of bad moves, huh?
I feel like every other day he has a castle that goes into foreclosure or something, or he has to like return a dinosaur skull to a museum or something.
Wild. Okay. I'm going to start off by saying that, yes, this is a Louisiana story. It is very witchy. It's very true crime and macabre-ish, which I think goes hand in hand with New Orleans. When I learned that what was it in the Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, when I learned that was a true story, I was like, that's crazy. I can't believe that's like a real. It sounds so fake. Like somebody had to have made it up, but no, it's real. So,
That's fun. Yeah.
Very fun because it's a very Louisiana thing. It's very in this story too. It's very combined with like voodoo, occultism, witchiness, corruption, jazz, the nightlife. It's like a fun all around true crime story. And Madame LaLaurie, who we're going to be referring to here, she kind of combined them all into the story. So I'm going to get into who she is, how she grew up, what was going on at the time that she grew up, what she did, and then what the outcome of that has been.
Cool.
So, Madame LaLaurie was born Marie Delphine McCarty in 1787. Her family is, yet again, another validation of my theory that I keep telling you, which is like if you were here in America early enough, you could become rich and successful. Like there was nobody here. You could just do what you wanted. Her family.
I mean, there were people here. We just killed them.
That's okay, fair.
But if you don't care, but if you don't care about that,
if you don't care about that, then yes.
If you're like, there's all this stuff I can steal.
It's all free stuff.
Yep.
So her grandfather is the one that came over from Ireland and settled the family in the Spanish-controlled region of Louisiana that is now known as New Orleans. So one generation after the grandfather migrates over here, Madame LaLaurie's uncle by marriage is a guy named Esteban Rodriguez Miro, who is the governor of this region, this territory. But again, actually, you know what, Taylor? I'm kind of going back now, because if I tell you I'm the governor of like New Orleans in like the late 1700s, like who gives a shit? Like it's nothing. Like it's just swampland. You know, so maybe like you're successful, but like not in a way that you'd really care to be.
Well, I think the people, I mean, you could probably arrest people.
That's fun.
and
Yeah, you
like
can walk
demand
around in handcuffs.
taxes,
That's
you
true.
know?
Yeah,
It's not nothing.
I should have thought of that. Should
You
call.
can be governor of your house, you know?
Yeah, that's why we're trying to come up with names for my retreat house.
Like it can be the governor's mansion.
I love it
hmm
that just Fars lives in.
You're not a governor, it's not a mansion, but it's perfectly named.
So back at this time period, this area of the UN, I don't know what you call it, whatever. This territory is controlled by the Spanish,
hmm
and it's intermittently controlled by the French. And there's a huge war that breaks out. It's so weird because, like, again, this is like now obviously the United States, but like the U.S. had nothing to do with this. Like, it was literally just Napoleon and
Yeah,
the Spanish kings fighting over like the space right next to Texas.
right.
It's
But
so
and
weird.
they'd also like never been there, you know. Remember Napoleon just like sells it and he's like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
he's like, get this out of my portfolio.
Exactly. I'm gonna actually get into why that happened too.
Yeah.
And like I said, the history is really complex. It gets handed back and forth between Spain and France, yada yada yada. Um, and during Madame LaLaurie's, I'll just call it Delphine. Delphine's easier.
Mhm.
During Delphine's childhood, slavery was rampant,
Mhm.
obviously. So Spain, France, and to whatever extent the U.S. is relevant in the story at all, they all permitted slavery, and there was like different distinctions on how it was done. So in Spain, slavery was probably better practiced by Spanish people than the rest, because at least with Spain, you could buy your way to freedom, whereas with France and the U.S., like they were trying to ramp up like
Mhm.
slave
Mhm.
practices, and like cruelty was kind of like more embedded within the slave trade.
Mhm.
And then also something unique that was going on in this part of the country was, unlike the rest of the slave trade, where it was usually like people coming over from Africa through the transatlantic slave trade. These folks were coming over from the Caribbean. That's where
Right.
most of it was happening. And so culturally, there was like this complete separation between like U.S. slave trade versus like what was going on in Louisiana.
hmm
Several things were happening around this time when Delphine was like a child to kind of like help tell a story of how she could become the person she became, essentially.
hmm
So you have the Haitian Revolution. So I did not know this, but apparently, which I should have known, but like apparently France owned Haiti.
Right.
They went over there, like this is crazy. They went over there and they took control of it and they enslaved the native people, which is like, is that insane?
hmm
And like that's a big reason why New Orleans developed the way that it did, because they were supplying slaves back and forth between New Orleans, because New Orleans was like at certain points owned by France, and so was Haiti.
hmm
But anyways, they had a revolution and revolted against the French, kicked them out of their country, and that was like a big to do about like, oh wow, there can be successful slave revolts. Like we didn't
Right.
know that.
It was a slave revolt. That's the important part. Yeah.
And then you have the Meta conspiracy, which was a planned revolt of slaves in Louisiana. That was uncovered, stopped. A bunch of people got executed as a result of that. You have the
hmm
Point Coupe conspiracy. That was enslaved people in Louisiana who plotted to kill our masters and flee to then Spanish-controlled Florida, and they got figured out and executed as well. At the same time around that, you had the German Coast Uprising, which was the largest slave revolt in U.S. history. About 500 revolted and were burning and killing plantation owners until the U.S. military was the one that actually suppressed that and killed a ton of them as retribution. But I'm saying all this because it like planted the seeds within the minds of like rich white people that, oh, this can happen,
Right.
and
They
like
got
when it
scared.
happens, it's like bad for us.
Yeah. Wait, but I wouldn't have any money, you see. If I paid them, then I would have less money. So you see my problem.
Yeah, exactly. That was so they had a really twisted logic as related to this, obviously.
hmm
Um, because the next piece of this is the reason why. Again, I don't know how to say this without like sounding tone deaf, but like there was incentive structures for slave owners to not be absolute shitheads to their
hmm
slaves
hmm
because of these things that were going on.
Right. Not because they didn't.
Not because they thought they were human, but
Right.
because they thought that if they treated them bad enough, like long enough, they could revolt and this could potentially happen to them.
Right.
So as a result of that, there was like a weird level of like in policing of the group of the rich white people of like, no, you can't do what you do because if your people revolt, then my people hear about it. They're gonna revolt against me, and then I'm
Right.
gonna get killed.
And then we're not gonna have any
Then
money.
we're gonna have any money. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Um, so like I said, like the reason Napoleon sold Louisiana to the United States was because of that Haitian revolt. It was literally like
Hmm.
the entire impetus for it. Um, So going back to Delphine, so she married three times. So her first husband, kind of irrelevant. This guy, he was like some regent, governor, or some shit back then. He was traveling from New Orleans to Madrid when Delphine was pregnant with their child, and he died en route. It was like he was in Havana, he got sick, he died. Nothing suspicious there. This is just like how people died back then.
Yeah.
About 4 years later, she was also really young. She was 13 when she first got married.
Oh, that
It's like
sucks.
crazy. Like it's like
Yeah.
even I know it was a long time ago, but it's like that's crazy.
I know.
So 4 years later, after the death of that husband, she married a second time, and this guy was named Jean Blanc, who would go on and have four more kids with him before he died 8 years later in 1816. Then she married a third husband, which sounds like the one that was like the most toxic and the one that like it sounds like they hate each other almost instantly. They got married in 1825, and she basically created like a whole separate universe for herself. She went and bought this property at 1140 Royal Street, which is for a brief period of time Nicolas Cage's property. Weird thing to say out loud. And she constructed her mansion there, which is like a separate thing. And then eventually, like the family would all move in, but she had her own separate space as well.
God, I just feel like it used to be so much easier to get construction done.
Yeah,
Like, how
so
do you do
because of
that?
slavery.
And I guess yes, that makes sense. But I feel like there's always like stories of like even in like after slavery ended, things that are like, oh, we just added rooms to our farmhouse. I'm like, how the
No,
fuck do you
this
add a
is
room to your
dude.
house?
This is like again. Anybody who cares about this stuff, listen to Ezra Klein, and he will articulate this down to the T. It's like regulations are why we cannot build anything anymore. Like,
It's so hard.
what was it? He was talking about how like Josh Shapiro suspended 8,000 different rules on how you should construct public works when the bridge collapsed in Pittsburgh.
Hmm.
And it was like, yeah, they were up and running in like 6 weeks. Like it was there's not a problem of like engineering, it's a problem of regulation. Anyways, that's a side story. The mansion that she built here at 1140 Royal Street is called the LaLaurie Mansion, which is still there to this day, although in a
Hmm.
different form. Um, Floor plans for the original mansion don't exist. Like they were never established. What we know roughly is that the mansion itself was about 10,000 square feet in size, and it had slave quarters as well. So it
Hmm.
had a separate unit that was slave quarters. The first floor was entertaining area. So this was where you would typically receive guests. You had a ballroom, a formal parlor with dining area, and that's kind of like what the first floor was. That was like for guests only, essentially. Second floor was living quarters for the family, bedrooms, things like that. And the third floor was where slaves were being housed. Then you had a separate slaves quarter, which was behind the mansion, and it was a two-story separate building, and that's where the nightmare stuff that we'll be discussing took place.
So now if I Google it and look at it, it's like on the corner of a city block. Was it always like that?
So Royal Lane was like one of the original main streets of New Orleans, but like obviously the texture of the city looked different, right? Because like there
Hmm.
was very few people there, but it was always in the center of the city. Yeah.
Cool.
So her public treatment of slaves was considered normal at the time. She was referred to as being very polite with slaves and gave the appearance of at least caring about their health and well-being. That was perceived as being overcompensation because anyone who observed LaLaurie's or Delphine's slaves would comment that their condition was dramatically worse and more haggard than other slaves in the area.
Hmm.
And again, like I said, like normally from like a moralistic perspective, nobody cared. Do whatever you want. The problem was don't be so bad that your people cause issues for us. You
Yeah.
know? So people cared to that extent. And a neighbor did report at one point seeing what they thought was somewhere around between 8 to 12-year-old enslaved girl jump from the roof of the mansion to her suicide. Later on, it was assumed that after everything was discovered, it was assumed that that happened because of a whipping that she thought she was going to endure. So she would rather just commit suicide at 8 years old. It's crazy.
That's awful.
Because of that situation that was reported by a neighbor, investigators did start looking into what Delphine was doing at the house. They did find evidence of cruelty, and as part of her punishment, eight of her slaves were forfeited back to the state. Eventually, because she's connected to like the government, she was able to buy back those slaves, so they ended up going back to her anyways.
Hmm.
There were stories that she would chain the cooks, the enslaved cooks in the kitchen. And in fact, one such cook would be the reason why investigators would ultimately discover what she was doing there. Because on April 10th, 1834, the mansion went up in flames. It started in the kitchen when an enslaved cook, a 70-year-old woman who was chained to the stove by her ankle, she was like, I would rather die in a fire and commit suicide here than endure what happens when you are taken to the uppermost rooms of the slave quarters. So
Wow.
she lit a fire. Um, People saw it. Bystanders would show up, and they again, this it's so weird because it's like a kindness, but it's done for like selfish reasons. They were trying to get into the slave quarters to free any slaves that were in there or shackled so that they wouldn't be harmed. So they go to this other house that's like behind the main house, and they ask Delphine for access to it, and she refuses to give them the key. And so they're like, whatever, we're just gonna break the door down. So they break the door down and they go inside, and they basically discover like the most creative haunted house decor like in history.
Yeah.
Um, there were seven people there in various stages of death or torture. They found a woman who, this is so gross. They found a woman whose mouth had been sewn shut. And once they cut the stitches open, they discovered that her mouth was filled with human waste.
Oh God.
Yeah. There was a man who had his limbs broken and then reset to heal backwards. They call him the
That's
crab man. Is that crazy?
awful.
They found a woman who was strapped down and had strips of skin ripped off of her, suggesting that she'd been consistently flayed over time, like a long period of time. One woman, she was somehow alive. Her stomach was cut open and her intestines were wrapped around her waist.
Was she alive?
Yeah,
Oh my
briefly.
God.
She died very soon after they found her.
Yeah.
And then several others were found chained to the wall, and they had iron collars with spikes aimed inwards on their neck.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, to the credit of the people at the time, when the cruelty was discovered, the citizenry basically just rioted and started destroying the mansion. They destroyed all the furniture inside, set fire to it. People questioned her. They didn't question Delphine. Her presence during all this is kind of like like in question. Like we don't know exactly what happened, but her
Hmm.
husband's perspective on this was like, "Why are you inquiring? Like, why? How dare you ask me how I treat my property? Like, you know, what I mean?
Right.
It's my stuff." Basically, is what he
Hmm.
was saying. So they destroy the mansion. They set fire to it. They destroy everything inside of it. They take the slaves and they transfer them to the local jail. And the reason that they wanted to do that was because they wanted people to see the cruelty. But I
Hmm.
was like, that's kind of cruel too. Like, don't you have
And they're not gonna
hospitals?
free them, right?
No, they're not gonna. Don't they have hospitals? I mean,
I don't. I don't know.
maybe they just don't care. They probably don't care.
Did they have a doctor meet them at the prison?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. But apparently 4,000 people went in and out of the jail just to see what was going on there.
Of course they
And
did.
yeah, that also it's interesting because it kind of dovetails with the Civil War where like the uprisings, the cruelty is just like it's just all kind of ramping up and
What
I'm
year?
sure
What year was it that they like
in
found?
1834.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're still ways off, but it's like still
Yeah.
like it's things are ramping up.
Yeah.
Like I said, we don't know after this whole key situation happened with the slave quarters what Delphine was doing or wasn't doing, but we know that once she saw the mob kind of tearing apart her house, the two kids that were living with her, and her mother who was also living with her, they fled from New Orleans to Mobile, Alabama, and then went to Paris, France from there. And that's where she lived. She kept wanting to come back to New Orleans, her home. She wanted to come back to where it was, but her family was like, "No, you definitely cannot go back there. They're going to rip you limb from limb." And
Yeah.
so she ended up living in Paris until the age of 62. She died in 1849, and the record keeping around how she died is sparse. Some stories I read said that she died on a wild boar hunting accident. But we don't know exactly how she died. And then 4 years after this mob had destroyed and burnt the mansion to the ground, the property that it sat on was acquired by a private citizen and rebuilt.
So like he rebuilt it. So the one that,
Exactly.
but it's so the one that you can visit now isn't the one that she lived in.
No.
No,
I mean, I'm sure like the foundation is and like maybe some studs are,
it
but
doesn't
like they
seem like
rebuilt it.
area, but like okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And then in 2007, Nicolas Cage bought it and then later lost it to foreclosure.
Oh my God, it's so funny.
But that's it. That's the Delphine LaLaurie of New Orleans, one of the worst people to ever live, and a cruel, mysterious piece of shit.
Are they sure it was her? Like just her? Or was it like other people helping her?
It's all speculation. Like I said, I mean, we're talking about a part of the country that wasn't a part of the country when this
Right,
happened, and
right,
then the countries that it was a part of were fighting a war. Like
right.
the record keeping isn't amazing on this. The assumptions are that yes, it was her that did it.
Yeah.
One of the stories had to do with the girl that jumped from the rooftop. Again, it's all rumors. I happen to think that like rumors have some grains of truth in them. And
Hmm.
so part of the rumor was that that girl, the servant girl, was combing her hair and she caught her hair on a knot, and then she got pissed that she like caught it on the knot and then turned around and started whipping her, and that's what caused her to like run out of the room and jump out of the roof.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's terrible.
Yeah, there was some later records would show that in the 4 years before the fire, 12 people died at the mansion.
Mm-hmm.
Like a funeral home, they accepted 12 bodies that came from the mansion. And so
Hmm.
if it wasn't her, I mean, who would it be?
I don't know. That's what I'm asking. Like, is it like what was her husband doing? Do you
We don't know.
know?
The husband sounds like she filed for separation almost immediately after they got married. The
Oh,
husband was like so they had a home together. She built this separately. It was like an H home situation. She was like
yeah,
she
yeah,
wanted
yeah.
like her hangout crib to be separate from where she like her husband was.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, she almost immediately filed for separation from the third husband.
Yeah, H.H. Holmes seemed to be able to find contractors really easily.
No regulations. I'm telling you, nobody cared. Chicago was just being built when Holmes was operational. Nobody had
I know.
laws.
I know, I know. The the creepy part in the beginning of A Delve in the White City, talking about how Chicagoland was like full of neighborhoods that weren't built yet, but they had streetlights.
Is that
So it was
real?
like, yeah, so it was
It's
like
kind of creepy.
streets that like are ready for houses, but they weren't built yet. It is creepy. It's meant to be. It's meant to be
Yeah.
creepy.
Um,
That's scary. And yeah, I'm sorry that I did you keep it in where I was like, oh, she sounds like Elizabeth Bathory? Did you keep that in that episode? Do you remember? When I said, oh,
no.
Elizabeth Bathory sounds like Madame Lalaurie,
You
and you were like,
did.
oh.
You did. Yeah, I kept that in. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Because yeah, I think it's very similar to be like, I'm like this mysterious woman in a mansion killing people. I know when Kathy Bates played her in American Horror Story, she definitely was like, using baby's blood to stay young and stuff like that.
Did you see that?
The horror story?
Coven. You saw
Yeah.
Coven, right?
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, because that was referenced a lot with Delphine was Kathy Bates.
I can't remember why she like. Oh, in it they had her when she died. They had her dying in the like sack of her house when people were like burning it down, and then they buried her, and then some like witches in like voodoo witches cursed her to stay alive, and then when they found her in like the now times, she was in her coffin still alive,
Yeah.
and then she became like a servant at the witch's house.
I should watch. I should try
It's
watching
real
that again.
good.
I tried watching it and I couldn't get through like two or three episodes. And then you told me that like I think you said that was your favorite, wasn't it?
My favorite is Roanoke, but
Roanoke. You know what? It's Roanoke. That's one I couldn't get through. I never tried watching Coven. All right.
mm, it's good. It's good. Yeah, I was thinking today, semi-related to that the next season of American Horror Story should just be Lady Gaga doing music videos. I would watch. I'd watch
That's
it.
not that scary.
I think it'd be better. It is scary. Have you seen the Abracadabra one? That's what I'm talking
No.
about. It's scary.
Hotel was amazing. Hotel
Yeah,
was one of the best. That's my
yeah,
favorite, I think.
yeah. Cool.
So
Thank
that's
you.
so I think I'm gonna pivot next week and Actually, I could probably do. You know what? Actually, one of our listeners, I call him out, Daniel, did send me a very impressive story of a young girl during Nazi occupation of some part of Europe who did like a lot of amazing stuff, and I
Cool.
might cover that next
That sounds
week.
fun.
Yeah,
I
I like
like it.
Nazi stuff.
Well, I don't know why you'd be thinking about it. Nobody knows.
Do
It's a mystery. Um, cool. Thank you for
you have
sharing.
any? Do you have any fun letters?
I don't, but I do have some stuff that I looked up since we last talked. Um, because I was closing out Virginia Hall's Wikipedia page, and there is a movie about her. It's called A Call to Spy, and was made in 2009, and no, sorry, 2019. And the woman from Castle's in it, but there's a couple other women. So even though I don't think these women really met in real life, in the movie there's three women, and then so I wanted to name them as well. There's a woman named Vera Atkins who was also in the SOE, who was a spy, who was cool, and then another woman, an Indian woman in the UK named Noor Inayat Khan, and she was in the SOE as well and was a spy, kind of with Virginia, which
Oh,
is
and
cool.
they're all part of this movie.
Yeah, I think the movie kind of put them together in a way that maybe they're not supposed to be put together, but um, Noor Inayat Khan, the Indian wo woman, she was killed at Dachau, it looks
This
like.
this movie made $790,000 at the box office.
It looks pretty terrible. It has,
Like I mean like I meant like a movie like a Quentin Tarantino movie, not like a movie where like the budget is less than like the meals for the
I
actors.
agree. I agree. This doesn't look very good. Like even the poster doesn't. I'm not excited about it at all.
Yeah, it looks like
Everyone
AI
looks
created it.
everyone looks kind of terrible, and I don't know why. But whatever. So there's one, but there should be a better one, even though I have not seen this one.
All right. Fair call
Um,
out.
and, and then I also um asked ChatGPT. Okay, I went to ChatGPT the other day and I was like, since I've been born, how many bad things have happened? And it was like, so many bad things. You're fine. And so it was just really nice. So since I've been born in 1982, There, these are the economic crises and recessions. In 1987, there was Black Monday stock market crash. The dot-com bubble burst in 2000. The Great Recession was in 2007, 2009. The COVID-19 recession was in 2020, and currently we're in an inflation crisis. So just wanted to, I don't know, that made me feel better. You know, we're always talking about we're just living in times, and times are
So
always pretty terrible.
I would say this. I have you ever seen the movie Margin Call?
You've talked about it a lot.
God, do I talk about it that much?
Yeah, I feel like you're the only person who's ever brought it up ever. And that might be just once, but that feels like a lot because zero people have talked about it in any other part of my
there's
life.
there's this scene with Jeremy Irons, and I'm not even a Jeremy Irons fan,
I
but
am a Jeremy Irons fan.
he is awesome in that movie, but he's only in it for like maybe like 6 minutes. And every 6 minutes of it is like worth watching because there's one point when he starts like going off on like all the financial crises that he's experienced. It was like, yeah, like every like 4 to 8 years this happens. This is the way it is.
Yeah,
Like it's like burning down the shrubbery, burning down the forest, like rebuild the trees or something. Like it is kind of interesting.
Jeremy Irons is the bad guy in the third Die Hard, which is Die Hard with a Vengeance.
I can't see him as a bad guy. He'll always be Alfred to me.
Um, really, I feel like he's always a bad guy. He's freaking Scar in The Lion King.
Actually, you know what? Now that you said it, he was also kind of the bad guy in Margin Call because he's one of the reasons why the financial crisis happened. You know what? You're right. I'll take it back.
Yeah, he feels like
Also, he was Ben Affleck's Alfred, which is like the worst one.
I know I've said this before, but did I tell you how I have a Trivial Pursuit game board, and one of the questions is which of these actors has not played Batman, and the answer was Ben Affleck because the person writing the card was like, who was the most ridiculous person to ever play Batman, and they put Ben Affleck in there, and then since that Trivial Pursuit was printed, Ben Affleck played Batman.
George Clooney and Val Kilmer were infinitely more ridiculous.
No, but
Infinitely.
but, but they were already in there. It was like George Clooney, Val Kilmer,
It's true. It's
Michael
true.
Keaton, Ben Affleck. So those were like the four you could guess from. So the person was like, I'm going to put a fourth person in here who will never be cast as Batman, and they were.
It's so ridiculous. Can you believe it? Fun times.
Cool.
On that note, Taylor, anything else to sign off with?
I don't think so. Thank you, everyone. Please send us an email, doomtofellpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you if you have any ideas, and find us on all social medias. And thank you for following us.
Daniel, keep sending me DMs on Instagram. Like your opinion, your topics are fun.
Yeah, same to people who I'm talking to a
Anybody
lot.
else? Anybody
Yeah,
else?
really.
Please
Like
do.
it's
We
very,
actually
very
do see
helpful.
them and read them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very
Cool. Thanks, Taylor. We'll go ahead and cut off.
cool. Thanks.